Today we are going back to the world of French verbs. I get it. You might think that conjugation is just too boring, a little bit too tricky, something that's not quite as important as learning new French words, something that you just tend to just leave for a little bit later. But here is the secret. Conjugation really is the best tool to improve your fluency and also boost your confidence. When learning languages, knowing how to use a verb, well, that's a little bit like knowing how to tie your laces. In a previous video on verbs, we learned about the verbs ending in ER, the easiest of groups and also the most common. Today, we are going to talk about the verbs ending in IR. Bonjour and welcome to French avec Ingrid, a channel where I help you improve your French in small and easy steps. Are you ready? So welcome here, leave your day behind, and let's go. Let's learn some French. Today we are going to cover the verbs in IR that are regular, how to make sense of those which are not regular, and we'll end up with a little recap, an overview of what we have learned so far, what you already know about French verbs. Spoiler alert, it's a lot already. So let's start with the exciting part. There are a lot of regular IR verbs. And regular, that of course means that you only need to learn the rule once, and then you can simply apply it to plenty of other verbs. These French verbs, the regular IR verbs, will form the second verb group. And regular, that obviously means that there may be some irregular IR verbs. And these will fall within the third category of verbs. So you may already have watched the video that we did on verbs ending in ER. We learned how a verb is conjugated. So to conjugate a verb, you need three things. The first one is the subject pronoun, the second one the verb stem, and the third one the conjugated verb ending. The subject pronouns are je, tu, il, elle, and nous, vous, il, elle in plural. The verb stem is the verb without the ending. So for verbs in ER, that would be the verb minus the ER. And for regular verbs in IR, you'll have guessed it, it would be the verb minus the IR. And finally, the ending will be the conjugating marks relating to the subject pronoun and the tense. So do you remember what are the conjugating marks, the verb ending for the conjugation of verbs in ER? Let's have a little refresh, because repetition is always good when learning a language. Let's use the verb to speak as an example. Parler. It's quite a useful everyday verb. Je parle, tu parles, il parle, nous parlons, vous parlez, il parle. So the endings are E, ES, E, ONS, EZ, and ENT. So let's do the same for the verbs in IR. For the regular verbs in IR, we'll use the verb to choose, choisir, another very useful little verb. Je choisis, tu choisis, il choisit, nous choisissons, vous choisissez, ils choisissent. So the endings are IS, IS, IT, ISSONS, ISSEZ, ISSENT. Notice that just like for the verbs in ER, phonetically the last letters are not sounded. So there are two things that I think are worth pointing out when conjugating verbs in IR. The first one is that the verb seems to behave a little differently between the singular form of the conjugated verb and the plural form of the conjugated verb. Je choisis, tu choisis, il choisit, a very simple IS, IS, IT ending. And in plural, nous choisissons, vous choisissez, ils choisissent, which seems to include that new suffix ISS followed by the endings ONS, EZ, and ENT. The other notable thing is that the je ending include an S which so far we had assimilated to the ending typical to the second pronoun tu. And also the ending for il, elle in singular now includes a T. Il choisit. So I did tell you earlier that the verbs ending in IR form the second most common verb group. Let me show you. Finir, to end. Je finis de manger et j'arrive. Choisir, to choose. Tu as bien choisi, cette couleur est très belle. Réussir, to succeed or to manage. Elle a réussi à faire tout son travail avant de partir. Réfléchir, to think or to ponder, to think about doing something. Nous réfléchissons à adopter un chien. Remplir, to fill in. Vous remplissez vos bouteilles avec l'eau du robinet là-bas. Rougir, to blush. Ils rougissent au moindre compliment. And in this group, there is also obéir, to obey. Punir, to punish. Guérir, to heal. Vieillir, rajeunir, grandir, grossir, maigrir, and the verb nourrir, to feed. So these are just some examples of the verb in IR that are regular, and as you can see, they are pretty useful verbs to add to your vocabulary. Okay, so let's move on to the verbs in IR that are irregular. The good news is there are only about 50 of those verbs. And in their quirkiness, we can actually identify 3 broad categories of irregular, regular verbs, if you see what I mean. What I mean is that there are some kind of patterns that we can hang on to. Some of these irregular verbs are actually quite important verbs and verbs that you will be brought to use. So let's see what happens with those verbs. The first group, the first category of IR verbs that are irregular, simply, but also a little bit weirdly, behaves like verbs ending in ER. And they're easy to identify. They're simply the verbs in IR that actually end in ir, or vrir, or frire. The ending ir, as in cueillir, to pick. Verbs that end with the letters F-R-I-R, like offrir, to offer, or souffrir, to suffer. And the verbs ending with the letters V-R-I-R, like couvrir, to cover, or ouvrir, to open. So some very useful verbs in there that you will use in everyday conversations. So let's see how it works with the verb to open, ouvrir. J'ouvre, I, tu ouvres, IS, il ouvre, I, nous ouvrons, ONS, vous ouvrez, IZ, ils ouvrent, INT. Exactly as you would conjugate a verb in ER. So that's really super simple. The second category of irregular verbs in IR tend to end with the letters MIR or TIR or VIR, like dormir, to sleep, partir, to leave, servir, to serve. So in this category, there are 2 things that you should be careful of. The first thing is about which letter you remove in order to get a stem. So for regular IR verbs, you simply remove the IR ending and you replace it with your conjugating marks. In this category, you also remove the IR ending, and sometimes you remove the letter right before that as well, but not all of the time. And the second thing are your conjugating marks, which are slightly different from the regular IR verbs conjugating marks. Okay, let's take an example to illustrate these 2 points. And for that, we're going to use the verb partir, to leave. Je pars, tu pars, il part, nous partons, vous partez, ils partent. Je pars, tu pars, il part. For these three subject pronouns, we are removing the ending IR and the letter before that. So we're removing TIR. And for the rest, we are simply using the regular verb stem. So only removing the IR ending. Nous partons, vous partez, ils partent. So we have reintroduced the letter T. And you will also have noticed that the endings are a little bit different. So instead of IS, IS, IT, we end up with S, S, T. And for the plural forms, these verbs also do not use the ISS suffix that you have learnt about with the regular IR verbs. So the endings are ONS, EZ, and ENT. And if that sounds familiar, it's because these conjugating marks are exactly the same as the one used with the verbs ending in ER. ONS, EZ, ENT. And things work in exactly the same way with dormir, to sleep. Je dors, tu dors, il dort. In this case, we have removed the ending IR and the letter right before that, so MIR. And we are reintroducing the letter M for the next three subject pronouns. Nous dormons, vous dormez, ils dorment. Let's look at some other useful verbs that fall in this category. We already know partir, to leave, and to that you can add sortir, to go out, sentir, to smell, mentir, to lie, and consentir, to consent. Let's move on to the third category of irregular verbs ending in IR. Okay, this one is a little bit tricky. It's more of a mishmash of different things happening to different verbs. There is one subcategory that gives me hope, though, and that I can explain to you easily. And this is for the verbs ending in NIR. For instance, tenir, to hold, and venir, to come. So these verbs are a little funny in the sense that you are adding an extra letter within the stem of the verb in some of the forms of the verb. Let's look at this example. Je tiens, tu tiens, il tient, nous tenons, vous tenez, ils tiennent. So the first three forms of the verb with the subject pronouns je, tu, il include that added letter, the little I, which you can see right after the T. Je tiens, tu tiens, il tient. And then we go back to the regular stem of the verb for nous tenons, vous tenez. And for the last form of the verb with the subject pronoun il in plural or elle in plural, ils tiennent. We are seeing that added letter I again, and we are also doubling the final N of the stem. Ils tiennent, T, I, E, N, N, ENT. And there are actually quite a few verbs ending in NIR. Have a little look at this list and maybe add to your vocabulary the verbs that you didn't know already. Devenir, to become, that's definitely a verb that you're going to use. Retenir, to retain, to remember, another verb that you will definitely use. Venir, to come, which is another verb that you will definitely use very often. Abstenir or s'abstenir, to abstain. Appartenir, to belong. Contenir, to contain. Convenir, to suit. Détenir, to detain, to hold. Entretenir, to maintain, like to maintain a garden. Intervenir, to intervene. Obtenir, to obtain. Parvenir, to reach or to achieve. Prévenir, to warn or to prevent. Provenir, to come from. Soutenir, to support. Se souvenir, to remember. And there are other naughty verbs in this IR irregular verb category, which, well, you'll just come across them, you'll notice them, and you'll gradually learn them. There you go, quite a nice strong conjugation lesson, but I'm sure you have learned a lot of very useful things in this video. If you have found it a little bit too much, maybe a little bit overwhelming, then my advice to you is to simply listen to this video several times and maybe even listen to it in chunks. Remember, it's really important that you work at your pace. Eventually it will all make sense. And to end this lesson, I'm going to finish with a little overview, a little recap of everything that you've already learned. And that's a lot, and you should be really proud of yourself. So we've already learned to conjugate the verbs in ER. Je parle, tu parles, il parle, nous parlons, vous parlez, il parle. Within this lesson, we've learned to conjugate the irregular verb to go, aller, the only irregular ER verb. Je vais, tu vas, il va, nous allons, vous allez, ils vont. We've also learned to conjugate the verb to be and to have. Je suis, tu es, il est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont. Et j'ai, tu as, il a, nous avons, vous avez, ils ont. And today we've learned to conjugate a considerable amount of verbs ending in IR. Je choisis, tu choisis, il choisit, nous choisissons, vous choisissez, ils choisissent. J'ouvre, tu ouvres, il ouvre, nous ouvrons, vous ouvrez, ils ouvrent. Je pars, tu pars, il part, nous partons, vous partez, ils partent. Je tiens, tu tiens, il tient, nous tenons, vous tenez, ils tiennent. So well done you. You should be really, really proud. That's a lot, and that's a lot that you can apply to so many other verbs. So I hope that this video was useful and that you have learned some new French. À bientôt dans une autre vidéo.